Hey, everybody. Welcome to Expanding the Conversation with Richard and Kofi. All right, right now, I'm the only one on. I'm waiting for Richard to come on. He's going to be on in a second. I want to make sure we started the broadcast within the time specified. It's been a while, guys. It's been a while since, we've been talking, and that just means a lot's been going on. All right, there's a whole lot that's been going on, and so we really appreciate um, all of you guys who usually tune in. So I'm going to give Richard a few minutes. He's going to be on here in a second. Today's topic is traveling. Um, we always talk about different things on this show that just we experience personally. We haven't really delved into um, anything that's controversial. Maybe in another show. But today we're talking about travel and how traveling can affect the mind. And if you've had the opportunity to travel, please log on. Share the live, and we'll talk today. We really want to talk about how does travel, shape our minds, change our perspectives, and it doesn't necessarily have to be international travel. I know not everybody has been fortunate to jump on a plane and go internationally. For those of us who have been able to do that, we're quite grateful. And that's had, I think, a big impression on who we are. But I see Richard is coming on. And Richard, you give me the big thumbs up when you're ready to jump on because we're already live. All right. So let's see. Add Richard. Hey, Richard, we're already live. So
I
I just
like it.
I just figured we'd do all the pre stuff right here. So I was saying to our viewers that we're gonna be talking about traveling and what travel can really do, or what it's really done. I think we're gonna share some of our experiences with travel. But I also wanted to talk about, when people hear travel, they always think also outside of the country, right? Outside of Guyana, for example, outside of the United States, or whatever country you might be in. But sometimes we don't even take the opportunity to travel, like even within, like within a country, or even like explore different communities, even within our own neighborhoods that we grew up, right? And so traveling doesn't really have to be limited to this idea of getting on a plane, right? Like an international plane and going to England, Europe, which is great. I mean, if you get that opportunity, I say go for it. That's great. Um, but there's so much opportunity as well to like travel even locally where you are. I know a lot of people in the US haven't gone to another state, for example. I think I was watching Family Feud the other day, right, Rich? And one of the questions was name a US state where a lot of tourists visited. And people got this question wrong. I'm sitting there going, Florida. Seriously? Florida, right? People like Washington, Virginia. Like,
New York City.
yeah, New York. Yeah, that's not a state, but hey, well, New York City is kind of like its own state, I
No,
suppose.
New York is a state, though, right? New York City is not a
Yeah,
state.
yeah. I know. I'm just saying though that Florida is. I guess the point I'm making here is that even though some people live like in the U.S. has 50 states, some people have never left those states, right? Some people have never even ventured out of their own state, and travel in the U.S. is like getting in a car, right? You don't have to travel, you don't have to get on a plane and drive across a border, right? You can't do it with Puerto Rico and Hawaii, and the Virgin Islands, right? But you certainly can drive like into continental United States anywhere, right? You can drive and travel and see so much. You can observe even going into a different parts of the state. Well, living in Florida, I remember once going to like a safari, not too far from where I lived, and it's a completely different environment. Like even North Florida, South Florida, the East Coast, the West Coast, right? Just very different places sometimes, or even going up north in the US, right? And even in Ghana, man, I'm still looking forward to. And let's talk about some of that as part of this, by the way. but I'm looking forward to like traveling the entire country, right? I've gone as far as the Pomeroon. I lived in Barbice for a while, right? I went to Kildonan for a little bit, Kildonan Primary School, all the way up to Quarantine, right? Of course, spent a lot of time in Linden, went all the way up the Barbice River. I used to work with the Arima Mining Company, right? So I passed, Ituni and them kind of places, got into Kokwani, right? And it's just so much to observe, right? Um, I remember hitting a police with a truck, coming on the trail back. That's a wild turkey, right? Coming back from Arima one time, floating to Kaichur, right? For example, went to the Kaichur Falls. So there's so much to see even in Guyana, right? So travel doesn't necessarily have to be international. That was the first thing I was saying. So Rich, let me kick it to you, man. Tell me about what do you think about travel? Let's talk a little bit about that.
I think a couple of things you've touched on there is key, right? Travel doesn't mean that you have to get on a plane and go somewhere, right? I think
Right.
travel, to me, what I would define travel as is going to a place uh, where it's culturally different, right? And,
Right.
and
Yeah.
and this can happen. We know this in Guyana, right? You could, if you go to if you go up in Georgetown, like I did, when you go to Esquimalt, for example, it's just culturally very different, right? I mean, it's quieter, people are nicer, they smile at each
Mm,
other, right? um, or even if you go to Berbice, because I think my dad and I drove up to New Amsterdam not too long ago, and we were sitting there, we were saying, well, it's so quiet, right? Everybody's driving
yeah.
around,
Yeah.
nobody's honking their horns, or and they seem like very happy people,
Right.
Um, so I think travel is a place where you go to it. It takes a journey to get there, but culturally it's different, right? Where I think you have the idea. To me, what travel does is it expands. Um, it expands our minds, right? That people can live differently and operate differently, and be happy, right? In very many places. I mean, growing up in Tonga, I could never understand how you country folks could be okay going to bed at 7 o'clock.
well, let me tell you something. Let me tell you something. I grew up in the country, but I remember when we went to Essequibo, right, on a school trip, and I think Benny Sankar's rice place out
Yeah,
there.
yeah, I was there.
We
Yeah,
went out there. It's one of the best Korean rice you
yeah,
ever had. I don't know if you
yeah,
remember that,
yeah,
right? I was wondering because we had grown up so much in Georgetown thinking about like Triscuit biscuit, and all these things that kids would get, right? I remember thinking to myself when I was in Eskimo, like, how do they get stuff out here, right? Like, how can you live away, right, from Banks DIH and all of these, like because they were like the center. You could see the connection with how maybe this stuff goes on the truck and then it drives across the bridge, and then you can use that, but there's no bridge across the Essequibo. How are they
yeah,
getting this stuff in here? And for a moment, you had to expand your mind because you remember you never had that thought before. I mean, obviously they put it on a boat, right? Right? But it's the thought at that moment because in all my time traveling, even on a boat, there were ferries. A lot of times the ferries didn't carry cargo,
yeah,
right? I mean, people brought stuff on. I remember ferries bringing cars and stuff, but it never really carried cargo. So you didn't see that side of like human existence of life, right? You came up the Demerara River and you saw the containers by the wharf, the John Fernandez Wharf, and things like that. But you never stopped to think that, hey, maybe some of this stuff makes its way into Essequibo somehow, right? You didn't see it, and in that moment, it made me think about, wait. There has to be a logistic systems that move products all around, right? Right, instantly you start thinking about that stuff. So I mean, just traveling to Essequibo sort of quickened my mind about the supply chain, the existence of a supply chain beyond, West Coast and Georgetown. Right, just that basic sort of experience.
yeah. And I mean, I think it's important, sort of expanding your mindset, right, and your horizons allows you to recognize that. Um, One of the things that I tell people, especially since I've been living in the U.S., because we come across, as you said, right? We come across a lot of different people. Some people have never left the state; they've never left the city that they live in, and it's a big city,
Hmm.
right? So, Um, but there's a perception of life outside of your circle, right? Or the places you know. Even if you live in the U.S., for example, and you live in New York or South Carolina or wherever, right, Florida, wherever. Um, when you go to different places, it's culturally different, right? And so we have perceptions of what things may be like. I certainly have the perception of what it was like to be in a place like South Carolina, but then a lived experience, right, becomes very different. Or
Yeah.
um, I've like recently, when I lived in the Maryland area, there we would drive past. We'd go across the Delaware Bridge all the time, and for me, Delaware was just this little, again, based on my my observations,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
little place. It seems pretty boring and dead. And you go across this bridge and then you enter into New Jersey, and that's the end of Delaware for me. But we recently went to Delaware and realized like the beaches are there. People are packed at the beaches, right? And
Yeah.
so I
There's more
think
stuff. Yeah.
the idea that when you venture into when you venture out to travel and see people living differently and having different ways of life, I think it piques your curiosity, right? Because then you want to know more. But it also helps you align that sort of perception you have with the place to a reality, right? Of actually physically being there.
Correct.
And then I think it just over time it changes you, right? You no longer jump to conclusions about what a place is like unless you understand the importance of being there, and seeing those people and interacting with them in order to really understand who they are rather than to have an assumption, right? So, if you think about a place like Haiti, for example, or Jamaica, you may have a perception that, there are parts of it that may not be safe and it's dangerous and it's violent, and so I don't want to go there. But then you go there, and you meet some of the nicest people, right? And you change how you view an entire country just by an experience. And so I think I've enjoyed travel because and like I said, it happens both ways, right? There are happy people everywhere and there are people that are struggling everywhere, right? And I think
Yeah.
once you go there and you have the experience, you realize that it's a good experience, but it's not um in a way, where you may come from may not be inferior to the place that you're visiting. It may just be a different
Yeah.
experience, right? And
You
so
see, so if I put it in plain terms, right? Travel allows us to sound less stupid, right? Less ignorant. No, because think about it, right? You just made a good point. Somebody might look at an island like Jamaica, and what they might see about Jamaica. I mean, a lot of people know of Jamaica from reggae music and dancehall music, right? Let's say for them that's all Jamaica. That's all the Jamaica they know. Then they may hear of the violence in Jamaica, right? So all they know and think of when they think of Jamaica, they associate a place like Jamaica with only those experiences, right? That they may have had, good or bad. The same thing about Haiti, a country like Haiti. You look at what might be said in the media and in different places. It's not that it's necessarily true, is that or untrue. It's just that people take that, and that becomes the complete characterization of a complete country, of a complete diaspora, right? Or a complete continent, right, and so forth. And like you said, and people will make statements that sound as soon as they sound ignorant, right? Ignorance in Barbados. And what happens is when you travel, you begin to realize that a lot of these places are no different than where you come from, because they're places in your own home country that you don't want to go to,
yeah,
right? Because they're neighborhoods that you don't want to go into. But there are so many other places, right, that you feel safe going through that, right? And so it allows you to be more sort of surgical in your talk, because a lot of people say America's this kind of place, America's that. But people would be surprised to realize that every state has like it's like its own country and
right.
has its own sort of character, right? And then not just every state, but sometimes districts within a state, or
Or city.
even like a city within a state has its own character. So you could be like in a particular state, and one city is very different from the other city, right? And so when you get that experience, it starts to allow you to change your conversation, right? Change the way you talk. And so now it's not just America, right? It's just New York. It's like you become more surgical in your conversation, right? Even if you start to refer to things like states and to different peoples and cultures and so forth, there isn't this sort of blanketing and stereotyping, right, of a whole country or a whole group of people. I always like when people say Africa. Africa's this. Africa's a whole continent you're talking about, man. You've got poor people on the continent, and you got very wealthy, rich billionaires on the continent. You've got oil on the continent, and you've got everything else on this huge continent. And to sort of take an entire continent like that you haven't traveled to and reduce it only to what you see in the media. Like I said, if you travel, you're probably sound less stupid. if you're describing
That's
that stuff.
that's fair. And I mean, and the important thing here, right? Because I know we've got a good number of Guyanese people that will listen to this conversation, right? Um, it's important to know that it goes both ways, right? So not if you're if you're living in a country where you feel like there's a better place to go to, right? Like you want to go do all the fancy shopping and see all the lights and the glitz and glamour. Not that there's anything wrong with doing that, but I also know that there's value. And I mean, I tell people this, right? There's value in going to places that may seem um, below your level, right? So that you can witness the fact that there are happy people everywhere, and there are people that are going through their own struggles everywhere, right? Because I think sometimes we make the assumption that a place is people will generalize, right? And I know Guyana's been in this bucket for a long time of
Right.
having the what is it the lowest GDP, and we're an impoverished
Not
nation.
anymore.
But when you're in Guyana, no, but even before, right? When
Yeah,
you're in
yeah, yeah.
Guyana, you don't get a sense that people are impoverished, right? If anything, they're incredibly happy and generous, and they will lay out the best for you when you visit. They'll cook you a meal. They'll invite you over to stay by their house at any point in time. And so it goes both ways, right? And so it's important that those who may not have been to certain parts of the world because they look down upon it, maybe sometimes venture to do that, because there is, like I said, lessons to be learned from those travels, right? Because a lot of times, when you see people are happy with a lot less, you start questioning yourself, well, why am I so miserable and always complaining when I see this
Yeah,
guy,
yeah. No, 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 it's true.
um, he's enjoying his life. And we talked a little bit about that. I think at one point, right, where we would, growing up, we would be knocking a tire down the road, and somebody or other that was excited. And you see kids with all this technology and all kinds of stuff, and they're still always bored and they're always happy. We're like, man, we did good.
That's a
We
good
were
visual,
never
man.
bored, and we were always excited and happy, and we didn't have a lot, but we were really good at sharing, and so those experiences, I think people can learn a lot from it, right?
Yeah,
And even our
yeah,
kids, right, that maybe
yeah.
have been
It's
robbed of some of that
it's a
excitement.
good visual. It's a good visual for anybody, any Guyanese now who lives in North America, right? To imagine the childhood you had, right? Imagine, as Richard said, you got a big car tire with mud on the inside, with two sticks, right? And you're pushing down the street and you're having a fun time of your life. Or you've got a bicycle tire and you have a stick and you're beating it and you're going, right? I remember having this conversation. See, I just imagine kids running on the outside, right, on an American suburb doing anything. Everybody's gonna look at it and think, God, that's crazy. But you're right. That's what we did, and I think you're right. I think when you travel and you see how people live, right, you get to really understand that there isn't really no difference there. People are trying to enjoy their lives regardless of the circumstances that they might find themselves in, right? And when you see that, it sort of teaches you a lesson. And one of the things that I always try to appreciate about Guyana, and I think a lot of people realize this when they leave and they go to the United States, is that you go to the US and some other places and it's work, 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 work all the time, right? And then there are folks who might complain that Guyanese sometimes. Well, Guyanese work hard. Don't get me wrong. Let me be very clear. But they have this way of also laying back and knowing how to take breaks. Friday afternoon, laying off, taking it easy. And you look at those two comparisons, you say, okay, there's got to be something in the middle there where I'm not overworking, but I'm also taking my work quite seriously, right? And I'm taking those breaks. And I think it's important because I remember when I first came to the US to study, and like good, guy got a lot of holidays, right? And I remember on Good Friday, my mother calling me. It's like almost I forgot it was Good Friday because I was at work. I think I was at work or at some activity, And I was talking to another friend the other day, and he's like, these kinds of things slip you. You don't realize. It's like it teaches you to be grateful for what you had, right? Like there were these breaks, there were these holidays, there were things that were happening that you could go and celebrate and do. And when you go into some cultures, it just isn't that, right? I mean, there's maybe happy hour on the weekend, but this opportunity to celebrate so many cultural aspects of life, right, doesn't always exist in some places, right? And so there is this like gratitude that we need to have. It teaches you that gratitude. Then you try to be like, man, I don't mind going back home to GT, drinking a coconut on the outside, right? Getting fresh coconut water and all these other things that sometimes we take for granted. Sometimes we take for absolute granted, you know.
Agreed. And what I would say is, in my experience, it's healthy um, to nurture the love for travel.
Yeah.
And as you said earlier, it doesn't have to be outside. But one of the things that I've learned to appreciate is that um, if you can enjoy having $5, not to say that you can enjoy having $1 million, but I think once you practice and you learn how to enjoy the little you have, then you're much able to enjoy the much that you have. And so I think, if you're listening to this and you feel like, well, I can't really afford to go anywhere, I think I would ask that you revisit that, right, and maybe really think about what it takes, because you could catch a bus and go down to Preca and hop in a boat and go to Bartik and spend the day and come back
Not
home.
that, yeah, yeah.
It's an
It's not that
experience,
bad.
right? I
I think
remember
it's like
when
a
we were
hundred
in
dollars.
yeah, I remember when we were in Bartica, and just being there, and we overnighted, so it was different. But just the fact that a little town, right, it never sleeps, right? They're always up, and it was exciting and interesting, and you could go down to the water side, and people would do everything down there, and it just seems like a nice, simple, happy life. And so,
I
yeah,
like
man,
Bartica.
I would encourage people to travel. I did some of my early travels where I used to go to Suriname and I'd catch a bus at about 7 in the morning. Then I would hop on a boat, and this was before they had the nice fancy ferry that they have now. And this boat would take about 2 or 3 hours in the water, and then you'd catch another bus, and it would take another. You'd get into Paramaribo at like 8 o'clock at night. So it was an entire day, right? 12 hours of just travel, and it wasn't luxurious travel by any means, but
Right.
it was always worth it, right? I mean, when I got there, of course, I was visiting my mother, so it made a difference. But just being in a different place, right? Seeing how people live and how they take care of their yards, or the foods that they eat, and their day to day life and how they conduct themselves is always it's always interesting and refreshing, and you could learn a lot, right? You could see the way people live their lives in different places, and you could steal from it, right? If you see, like, people are pretty good in Suriname, I think, about going to the riverside and catching fish and just make it very casual. And I think you learn a lot. You learn a lot from going and seeing the way people live in parks and places, right? People go out with their families and they have picnics and stuff like that, and you could take some of that and take it back home and use it in your own life to just have a different experience. So
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of travel. I'll say that in closing. I think it's certainly helpful for us to grow and expand our horizons. And as you said, maybe be better informed for better conversations, and not always have
No.
a perception that's fed by the media
Yeah.
about what it's like.
Yeah.
So
I
I'll
think.
end with that.
Yeah, yeah. I would end with I actually want to promote more travel within Guyana. I do encourage people to travel outside of Guyana. Like you, I've had the privilege of travel mostly due to scholarships and studying. As a student, I went to Barbados. I've had the opportunity to go to Trinidad. I've traveled around the Caribbean because I worked at CARICOM for a little bit. Been to Jamaica, the Bahamas, Turks and Caicos Islands, all these different places, right? Belize. and then North America. Right? I haven't gone to Europe, as yet. But one of the things I would say, and I think you're absolutely right, Rich, is there's so much to learn within the boundaries of Guyana. I ask people, for example, when I was growing up in Surrey, we used to shop at the Nora Market, right? And I know a lot of people who used to come to the Nora Market from outside of the West Coast, right, from like Georgetown or different places that they had a stall in the Nora Market. But one of the things that we never did was go to like Monrepo Market, Monrepo Market or somewhere else, because there's even so much to learn from going along the neighborhood. I remember remember staying in Melanie for a while, right? Our family up in Melanie. I remember even going to Melanie. It's a different neighborhood from where I grew up in Shortville, very similar, right? But they had different kids, and their style there is different, And you go to different communities. Where I used to go into Winter Forest. My family comes out to Winter Forest, for example. I used to go into Winter Forest, and it's a different kind of community, different kind of culture within Winter Forest than say like Shortville. Even the neighborhood Iflet, which was next door to Shortville, right, had a different feel, a different style. People did different things. Again, compared to Short. So every neighborhood had their own sort of culture and style and way that they did things, slightly different. All Guyanese community nonetheless. Even when you went to Burpees, and I used to ride into the top here, right, back then, right? So completely different experience there than say what you would experience, like you mentioned earlier, going to the Essequibo Coast. So my huge encouragement to people here is it really doesn't take a whole lot, like you said, to just travel, even to go up the highway, right? And a lot of people go up to the creeks and things like that, going into Linden, seeing and touring Linden, right? These are things they used to be able to do in school. So yeah, my huge encouragement is let us learn more about our own country, and explore our country and the peoples and the culture within our country, because I think that's one of the huge benefits of travel is that it promotes sort of cultural understanding, right? And sort of camaraderie between people. When you actually see how people live, you can embrace that and understand what it is they're going through and doing in their own community. So yeah, I don't think there's a downside to travel here.
No, for sure. It's
All right.
expensive. That's one of the things
It
I'll
just
say. It's
depends.
never
It
cheap.
just depends. It just depends.
It's always worth it. You'll never regret, I think, spending your money on travel. I'm yet to meet the person that's regretted spending money on travel. So it certainly is worth it, I think.
All right, man. Guys,
All
thank you
right.
so much for having this conversation with us. Hope many of you get an opportunity to travel. Maybe sometime we'll talk about some of the cool places we've been and some of the cool experiences that we've had in traveling. I mean, that's one of the, I think there's endless stories. For every place you've gone to is a whole different story. So maybe some other time we can expand on that. But thank you guys for listening. Really appreciate you. Guys, take care.
Take
All
care,
right,
guys.
bye.